It probably won't surprise you to hear that I grew up on Blizzard RTS games. Warcraft 2, StarCraft, and Warcraft 3 were all games I loved playing as a kid, but it was Warcraft 3 that really dominated my life. So what about Warcraft 3 did I love so much? Was it the intricately crafted campaign? Sure, and I've already made a video on what made that work. Did I get obsessed with online multiplayer? Well, I never played 1v1s, but I definitely played a lot of 3v3s. Still, competitive multiplayer, while enjoyable, was never my passion. How about the custom games then? I definitely loved hopping onto Battle.net and joining whatever lobbies people tended to be hosting. I loved things like Tower Defense, Risk, epic Lord of the Rings battles, Run Kitty Run, Vampires vs. Humans, Footman Wars, and so many other incredibly creative games that were created by random fans. I would probably include Dota here too, but thankfully the Dota community destroyed my Dota addiction before it even started. Every time I tried to join a Dota game, players would quiz me about the game to determine if I knew how to play. Since I was a noob, I didn't know the answer to these quizzes, so I got kicked out about 90% of the Dota games I tried to join. Since I had no way to learn the game, I went on to develop slightly healthier addictions instead. In retrospect, I definitely dodged a bullet there. I'm thankful the community was so toxic they prevented me from joining it. Still, these custom games aren't why I love this game so much. Not really. The true reason I love Warcraft 3, the reason I spent my entire teenage life completely obsessed with this game, was the world editor. I've always been at my happiest creating things, and the Warcraft 3 world editor is just so powerful and so easy to use. Even when I was a kid, I loved creating scenarios and campaigns, constantly trying and failing to make fun levels to play. Over time, my creations got more and more complicated, and some of them even became playable. I learned how to use regions, triggers, the object editor, and eventually discovered the campaign editor. Then, I finally put it all together and started my grand master plan, my goal being to create 4 Blizzard-style campaigns spanning all 4 Warcraft races, but with a twist. Instead of this being a Warcraft campaign, I wanted to blend the StarCraft and Warcraft universes together to create a massive story spanning both realms. I called it StarWarscraft. No, not that Star Wars. It's about combining StarCraft and Warcraft. StarWarscraft? Right? It makes sense, I swear. Hey, listen, nobody said my middle school self thought this campaign through, okay? That's what it's called, and changing the name would mess up a whole bunch of triggers, so I'm kinda stuck with it now. In this video, I want to give you some insight into Teenage Red Wing's decision making, as I show off the best campaign I've ever made, one that took about 10 years of my life to create. This campaign is not a masterpiece by any means. The story is a mess, the gameplay has a ton of gotcha moments after long tedious sections, and there are several bugs. But it is playable, and it's fine. So, let's begin. Welcome to my StarWarscraft Terran campaign. Chapter 1, The Zerg and Terran. The first thing you'll notice when we start it up is that this campaign is set after Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal and StarCraft Brood War. There is one problem with this. When I started this campaign, I hadn't actually played Brood War, and I don't think I had finished the Beyond the Dark Portal campaign either. You'll notice some weird inconsistencies later, but for now we start with a short cutscene. Arthas sees some weird creatures, charges in, then gets rescued by a few Terran Marines coming through an infested warp gate. Then, a Marine explains to Arthas that these creatures are Zerg, and that we need to destroy all the Nidus canals in the area. Wait, Nidus canals? Yeah, so my middle school brain thought, how do the Zerg appear on Azeroth? Well, they just use Nidus canals, of course. Those travel through space, right? After all, it's instantaneous teleportation. Okay, so the point is, I am an idiot. I decided to change them to infested warp gates, but forgot to change the dialogue here. You'll also notice that models are very inconsistent in this campaign. I don't have 3D modeling skills, so I eventually used models from the Hive Workshop wherever I could, but when I don't have a Hive Workshop model, I tend to just use whatever I can find that looks even slightly right. The first level is an easy non-base level. You just wander around, rescuing stranded Marines to build up your forces, then die. Then I die again. Okay, here's another thing to know about this campaign. I made the hard difficulty by upping the pressure until I struggled to deal with it. This campaign has multiple difficulties, and normal mode is not too bad most of the time, but hard mode is definitely a challenge. The infested warp gates at the top of the map are constantly spamming Zerglings and Hydralisks, and the Hydras are really scary. If you're observant, you'll also notice some Orc Terran Marines on the map, which was not intentional, but I'll explain that one more later. On my third try, I focus on moving fast, rescuing the easier Marines to get, and destroying the infested warp gates early. I kinda cheesed the mission. I really should lock this mission to daytime, but once the warp gates are destroyed, I can circle back, get a big army, and destroy the final Zerg cluster on the map. Then I murder an Overlord and move to level 2. Chapter 2. A brutal defense mission. The story here gets completely ridiculous. Apparently, one Overlord escaped to another planet, and if this Overlord gets back to the Hive, it could, inform the Zerg about this planet. The hive mind, though, is out of range of the hive mind, I guess? I don't know. Teenage Red Wings didn't really think this one through. Anyway, one Marine claims he can build a race to follow the Overlord, but needs 20 minutes to do it, and we are camped near some very aggressive orcs. This is a defense mission, and I actually think it's a fantastic level. You start with everything you'd ever want. 3 saturated gold mines, a ton of peasants on lumber, 4 peasants at the front to build towers, 100 supply, Arthas, defensible positions, and 8 Marines. However, the attackers in this level are also utterly ridiculous, as 4 fully functional orc bases swarm you with maxed out armies every couple minutes. Altogether, this level just works. I love playing it. I send 5 Marines to the bottom, then send Arthas and 3 Marines up top. The key to this level is keeping your Marines alive at all costs. Marines deal ridiculous amounts of damage, but they are still pretty frail, so you need to be very careful about keeping your Marines firing in the back. Eventually, my base starts to run out of lumber, so I run out of money to build anything other than footmen. The final Orc Death Wave comes in with 4 level 10 heroes, and I retreat to my main base. My Marines start falling, and the timer starts counting down. I mess up my hotkeys for a second, miss my Holy Light, then forget to Divine Shield with Arthas, as all of my units fall. Still, the timer is ticking down. 3, 2, 1, 0, and I failed the mission. This level is the hardest level in the entire campaign, and while I have beaten it before, I've never done it consistently on hard mode. On normal mode, the enemy doesn't get catapults, so it's not too bad there. You may notice that this level's supply cap is 90, and there's a reason for that. This level was originally made in Reign of Chaos, but when I upgraded this campaign to support the Frozen Throne, suddenly every orc base was attacking with 10 additional supply every wave. This became completely absurd, so to maintain my original balancing, I hard-capped everyone's supply at 90 and called it a day. Every other level has a supply cap of 100, but this level hit a perfect balancing sweet spot that I probably could not replicate on purpose if I tried, so I did not want to mess with it. I probably should add a couple more trees on the mountain, but overall I actually love this level. However, it's also really hard, and I have no idea how long it would take me to beat it if I kept trying, so I'm moving on. Chapter 3. Wraiths, Siege Tanks, and Tedium. Arthas and the Marine have pursued the Overlord to another planet, where it, waits to gather reinforcements to make its way to another planet to meet up with the actual hive mind. Yeah, this story is a mess, but the goal is to destroy the Zerg and murder another Overlord. Since the objective of the last battle was to stall out until a Marine could build a Wraith, in this level you start out with a heavily fortified Wraith that can't fly. So this level has a lot of issues. I started with, I want to play around with Cloak Wraith, then realized that Cloaked Wraiths are really good at sniping Overlords. To prevent cheese, I changed the Wraith's movement type to hovering, so it essentially is treated as a flying type unit but can't fly. This decision gets worse. To prevent the Cloaked Wraith from destroying all the Zerg by itself, I placed Spore Colonies everywhere. Since these are Zerg structures, they have a ton of health and are a slog to destroy, while they counter literally only one unit in your army. They don't even really work either, as the enemy Zerg spawns from 3 infested warp gates, and the Wraith can easily destroy these while cloaked. Adding the Wraith was supposed to be a cool super unit, but in practice it just makes the level a massive slog while also allowing you to cheese half of it. If I got rid of the Wraith and replaced it with the Goliath, I can get rid of every spore crawler on the map and make this level flow so much better. The worst part? I didn't even realize this until I played the campaign for this playthrough. It's kind of amazing how blind we are to our own creations sometimes. It's so obvious in retrospect, and I will be changing it. Anyway, this level is a long, mostly linear path where you have to use your army to push through the Zerg defenses. In every other Warcraft-StarCraft crossover mod I've seen, level designers usually try to create balanced asymmetry, but I went for a different approach here that I like a lot. In this campaign, StarCraft units are way stronger than Warcraft units. But that doesn't make Warcraft units useless. StarCraft units are generally glass cannons, which means small StarCraft armies are vulnerable to high burst damage with range. Warcraft spellcasters are also still very powerful, as Mutalisks and Hydralisks are still vulnerable to effects like Slow and Polymorph. Sunken colonies can get outranged by mortar teams and slowly whittled down after their defenders are lured away. With a critical mass of rifles, mortar teams, and spellcasters, it's still possible for the human army to slowly advance through the swarm. There are some fun or possibly infuriating traps along the way. Every once in a while, the terrain gets a little lumpy, and if I move through that terrain, burrowed Zerg will pop out of the ground and ambush me. Did I actually figure out how to get Zerg units to burrow? Heh, no. I tried, but I couldn't figure it out. These ambushes are all triggers. The Zerg are hidden by the triggers at the start of the level, then they all unhide when you enter the corresponding region. Since the player doesn't have detection in this level, I still think it's a cool mechanic. The Zerg also start sending Mutalisks, which I was completely unprepared for. You might think it's weird that I'm not prepared for the attacks that I literally coded in, but in the original version of this mission, I started sending these Muta waves once the infested warp gates were destroyed. After realizing this incentivized cheese, I changed it so the Muta waves will start coming after a certain amount of time passes in the mission, and I completely forgot I made that change. The Mutas destroy my town halls, and I reset. My next attempt, I build up a bit more before going and cheese some of the infested warp gates, so I get way further in the level. About halfway through this level, I rescue a group of stranded marines and a siege tank. This was a later addition to the level, but I love it, and the siege tank is really fun to use. With Brood War siege tank stats scaled to the Warcraft 3 Marine, alongside a working siege mode, my siege tank is a menace that allows me to take on much larger Zerg armies. Pretty soon, new massive attack waves start spawning, including some very dark Zerglings and Hydralisks. I have absolutely no idea why some enemy Zerg units just aren't shaded properly, but it doesn't seem to affect the gameplay, so I really don't care that much. The Zerg have some pretty impressive armies defending a fully functional swarm base in the upper right hand corner, but with my siege tank I'm able to take them out. I send my Wraith back to the base to deal with the Mutalisks, but I'm not paying attention, and turns out my Wraith isn't actually invincible. Well, this time I do the same thing, cheese the initial attack waves even harder, and micro my Wraith at home so the Mutas target my towers first. Eventually, I destroy the Overlord that knows about Atheros. A new Zerg attack wave spawns around my army, so with the mission accomplished, Arthas and the Marine pilot dimensional shift to a completely new, undiscovered planet. Chapter 3.5, The Undead. Before I continue, I want you to place yourself in the mind of a 13-year-old Red Wings. You've tried to bring your epic crossover idea to life, and that level was just bad. You've tried and failed to create a working hatchery. You don't know about the Hive Workshop yet, so your Mutalisks are oversized riderless wyverns, your Wraith is a big gyrocopter, and your Ultralisks are oversized Urthidons. Sure, your level is playable, but you just created an insanely boring slog of a level, one that's so much more tedious than the one you just watched me play. Creating this hybrid campaign just didn't work. But you don't want to give up. You're still having a blast trying to make this campaign. So, the solution is obvious. Just ignore the StarCraft. in the StarCraft crossover campaign. You know what? I wasn't skilled enough to use StarCraft units back then, so I don't regret this decision. It created a very weird narrative, but the story was already awful. So let's go! To explain the shift, next we have a cutscene following a Dreadlord Kerrigan in the middle of a Zerg hive. Kerrigan is looking for something, and to find it, she unleashes psychic energy across the universe to form the Undead. Her plan is to then invade the planets that successfully resist the Undead invasions, cutting down on her search time for whatever she's looking for. Kerrigan is apparently strong enough to raise the dead on thousands of unexplored worlds across the galaxy, but simultaneously too weak to sense an overlord that left hive cluster range. Brilliant writing, me. Well, this sets us up for an undead invasion of Azeroth. Chapter 4. Orc Terran Marines? On Azeroth, the undead appear out of nowhere, sending flyers to attack Jaina's base. In this level, you start with virtually no anti-air technology, relying on Jaina and guard towers to defend against the undead. In this universe, humans just don't have rifle and steam tank technology yet, because those things didn't exist in Warcraft 2. With no mobile anti-air or siege technology, attacking the undead base is suicide. However, there are also orcs in the area that have captured a Terran Marine, so your first quest is to destroy the orcs and rescue them. There are 2 orc bases on this level. The closer one attacks you with grunts and trolls, which is scary but manageable. However, if you don't overwhelm this base quickly, things can get out of hand fast because the second orc base attacks with master shamans, witch doctors, and Terran Marines? Wait, what? Why would Terran Marines team up with the orcs? Not even my 13-year-old brain could justify that, right? Actually, it didn't. This one is not my fault. When I created this campaign, there was a very cool unit that Blizzard added to the game called the Chaos Space Orc. When I saw them, I thought, wow, those units are freaking cool. So, I decided it would make sense for the orcs to capture a Marine and torture this technology out of one, reverse engineer the Marine's gun, and field an army of Chaos Space Orcs in this campaign. This worked. It was great. But then, the Reforged client, which I never bought by the way, decided to remove the Chaos Space Orc from the game and replace it with a unit called the Terran Marine. This model is identical to the pre-existing Marine model in every way, and has the same stats as a Chaos Space Orc. Yet again, Reforged just said, hey, you know fun? You're not having that here. So now, the orcs train Terran Marines, and I'd probably need to go to the Hive workshop to get it working again. Once I rescue the Marine and bring him back to my base, I immediately get access to Rifleman and complete the workshop tech tree. Then, this level is pretty easy from here, as my new gun-based army can crush the undead. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid level, and I'm pretty happy with it, Orc Terran Marines aside. Chapter 5. Waygates and Flags. If you've been carefully watching so far, you might notice that some of these maps look a bit familiar. That's because I cheated when making this campaign. I am awful at designing my own maps, so instead of trying to build a map from scratch, I created this entire campaign by taking a pre-existing melee map, then modifying it to suit my needs in the campaign. This method created some pretty good levels, like the defensive mountain in level 2, but it also has its problems. Most of the melee maps in Warcraft 3 are massive, and the maps that work best for my purposes are small to medium-sized maps. Could I have solved this issue by taking a map then modifying the playable map area to cover half of it? Probably, but I never thought of that until I wrote the script, so I didn't do that. Instead, I just embraced the huge maps, trying my best to use them even when 90% of the map would be meaningless empty space. Level 5 is one of these maps. The undead are now attacking me with a massive ground army, and I need to destroy them. The orcs have a huge base up north, and the undead have 2 large bases to the east and west. This level's gimmick is Waygate travel. The undead bases are blocked off with a series of overly elaborate indestructible gates and a ton of random skeletal creeps, so attacking them from the front is completely impossible. The way to beat this level is to attack the orc base, then use the Waygates within the orc base to teleport directly to the back of the undead bases. The attack waves on this level get terrifying, with the undead bases constantly sending giant waves, and the orcs sending more Chaos Space Orcs, Terran Marines. One thing I like about this level is that the orcs and the undead aren't allied, so they can intercept each other's attack waves, which is always fun to watch. The front of the orc base is also ridiculously fortified, as my teenage self went a bit overboard with enemy defenses. However, I was also apparently obsessed with Waygates at the time, so I decided to create an optional quest to bypass these defenses. Near the orc base, there are a bunch of furbolgs, and if I take out the furbolgs, I get a sun key. I can then use this sun key to activate a Waygate close to my base, which I can use to completely bypass the ridiculous orc defenses and attack the base from the other side. Originally, this level and the next one were so large that the only way to leave your base was to build an excessively massive wall of towers. But I eventually changed them to give us a new unit, the Flag Bearer. This unit is frail and has no attack, but is also fast and can place flags around the map, which are functionally sentry wards that last a ridiculously long amount of time. These flags, combined with Jaina's mass teleport, actually creates a pretty fun way to move my army around, allowing me to escape my base without needing to build way too many defenses. Once I destroy 2 enemy bases, the gates to the enemy undead base all open up, and the creeps guarding these bases attack straight towards your castle. To be fair, this only happens on hard mode, but it is definitely an evil gotcha moment that is impossible to defend. If you destroy any of these creeps attacking, larger versions of the dead creep will respawn and head straight towards you, and they eventually multiply, so trying to fight them is pointless. This is absolutely not good game design, but it is kind of funny, so it evens out. The way to play around this is to just immediately attack the final undead base and destroy it, so I do that before my base is overwhelmed and move on to the next level. Chapter 6. Making Kaga Proud. In my humble opinion, the best video on my channel is part 2 of my blind, scuffed, semi-Iron Man run of Fire Emblem Thracia 776. This video, sitting at a mere 155 views, is way more interesting than my Archers Only Warcraft 2 video with 55,000 views. What makes it so good is Thracia's absolutely unhinged level design, and how it makes my life a living nightmare. The first level in that section is a Fog of War escort quest with ambush spawns, and it only gets crazier from there. Thracia's most horrifying level, though, has to be Dark Forest, a level with limited movement, reduced accuracy, an enemy berserk staff that can hit the entire map, and unmarked portals that can teleport your units across the map without warning. It is awful. And level 6? Level 6 is my Dark Forest. The gimmick here is unmarked death zones that will immediately kill any unit who enters them. Kaga would be proud of me for independently thinking of his idea and running with it. Actually, my original idea was even closer to Kaga's idea, with unmarked warp zones that would teleport your units to random spots on the map, but I quickly abandoned that idea because of the utter chaos it brought. I actually made a ton of changes over time to make this level slightly more accessible than it used to be, but what I ended up with is still horrifying. We start with a cutscene showing off these death zones, as Lord Garithos joins Jaina with a bunch of reinforcements. He charges at the undead base with a whole bunch of knights, only to get himself and every single knight killed without ever reaching the base. As he slams himself against his death zone, it turns red, warning the player not to go there. These weather effects were a late addition to the level. For a long time, they did not exist and a player would have had to remember where the zones are. So I'm going to take you on a tour and explain how to beat this level. First, you take a long, windy, curved path up that puts you near the green undead base. However, death zones stop you from entering the base, so instead you head north. Take a waygate that teleports you over to a northern clearing, then head southwest towards a different undead base. If you get an army over there, you can attack the first enemy base, and seemingly reach a second, but it's not going to be that simple. Another death zone blocks entry, so instead of going straight towards the second base, you need to head up and purchase a Goblin Zeppelin. These Zeppelins spontaneously combust if they leave their designated unmarked zone. Their only purpose is to lead you to a waygate, which takes you directly to the heart of the next undead base. Once you go through this waygate, you can destroy a second undead base, then take another waygate inside this base to bring you to a clearing on the eastern edge of the map. At this point, a few death zones fade. You can send your army through that northern waygate again, and this time bring them further south, attacking Orange's base from the west. When you've destroyed Orange, you can take a waygate in Orange's base back to the waygate point in the west. a dust field to the west of green's base is destroyed, allowing you to finally attack and destroy green. Now, you might assume that something this convoluted was designed around flag bearers and mass teleport. You might also assume that this level having so many enemy spellcasters was because I wanted the player to beat it with arcane towers and spellbreakers. These assumptions, while completely valid, are also completely wrong. When I started working on this level, I did not have the Frozen Throne expansion, so I didn't even know that spellbreakers and arcane towers even existed. I also didn't have flag bearers in the initial draft of the level, and I really wanted players to go through the maze, so I disabled mass teleport in my initial draft. Oh, I also prevent the player from training mortar teams or building cannon towers to make it harder to bypass the death stones by cutting through the forest. Yeah, I was a sadistic monster when designing this level. I could beat it because I knew how to beat it, but I imagine this level is a horrifying nightmare for anybody else to play. We also aren't done with my completely sadistic tendencies for this level. When I got through the maze and attacked green, a message popped up that my base was under heavy attack. The one saving grace of this level is that this is the only level in the entire campaign where the AI don't actively train siege units, so a wall of towers is really effective at stopping every attack wave. Except the one that comes out of nowhere at the very end. My first time through for this video, I forgot how insane this attack was and got greedy, trying to destroy green before teleporting back, and my base got demolished. My next attempt, I prepare better for this attack and mass teleport home sooner. This attack is basically the Undead's last gasp, as there are 2 more bases in the lower right of the map that activate as soon as you attack green. These bases have pre-placed siege equipment, but don't train any extra, so they're pretty easy to deflect after their massive initial attack wave is dealt with. I deal with their attack, then I take out the rest of green and head back to my base. If you thought my evil was exhausted though, think again. Once green's base is destroyed, I have a pretty straight path to attack and destroy the purple base, but once again, there is a death zone in between purple and teal's base. This death zone is particularly egregious, as there are enemy units inside this area, giving this level one last gotcha moment. Instead of going through the death zone, I can purchase a few zeppelins from a goblin laboratory in purple's base, then head east to murder a level 10 lich in the southern clearing. Getting rid of this lich finally removes every single death zone, which leaves my units free to mop up the rest of teal's base and clear the level. Here's an image of the entire path. This level is horrifying. I have no idea what I was thinking making it. It would be awful to play blind, and I apologize for anyone who does play it. Chapter 7, the longest level. Now, we shift our attention away from Jaina to join up with Muradin, who's fighting the Undead in the Kaz Mountains. This level is much simpler than the last one, no horrifying gimmicks, just a straight up macro level where the momentum is everything. There are 9 enemy bases on this massive map, each one specializing in a different type of undead. The first base uses ghouls, second crypt fiends, third banshees, and so forth. The 8th base uses frostworms, then the final base also uses frostworms, but is utterly massive and surrounded by a giant moat. Originally, I had a giant death field surrounding the massive center base, but thankfully I removed that when I realized it was completely and totally unnecessary. The gimmick here is that each base will come online slowly over time, so if you destroy each base quickly, you can get ahead of the game and avoid the pressure. But if you're too slow, you can get overwhelmed by the sheer number of attack waves. You also finally get the complete human tech tree on this level, granting you access to Griffin Riders and Dragonhawk Riders. This level is normally not too bad, but today it's feeling especially easy, and I'm not entirely sure why. Then, I get attacked by enemy banshees before the crypt base even tries to send an attack wave, which feels wrong. Then, when I've cleared through every base except the center base, I expect the center base to attack me with frostworms, but they remain completely passive. The center base is ridiculously massive, so my first few attacks there fail, but since they don't counterattack, I'm never in any actual danger. So I eventually beat the level, then look at the level in the editor, and... It turns out the Crypt Fiend attack trigger was only attacking with blue units instead of teal units, and green's attack trigger was only attacking with units in purple's base. So, this level was straight up bugged. I wish I could blame Reforge for this one, but honestly, it's probably on me. I probably changed the trigger at some point without testing it, and messed it all up. Oh well. At the end of the level, we find a massive demon gate that leads to Northrend. Jaina shows up and offers her support to head to the Northrend and end the undead threat once and for all. Chapter 8, Twilight of the Humans. Now we're back to another level that I think came out amazing, and it's basically my take on Twilight of the Gods. Muradin, Uther, Jaina, and Antonidas have gone through the portal in Northrend, and all of them lead their armies to attack the biggest undead stronghold in Northrend. The green undead base will attack each of your allies, one by one, until you're the only one left, and you need to survive this onslaught for 37 minutes. Their first victim is Antonidas' base of footmen and magic users. The undead's initial assault involves 3 level 10 heroes, and without help, Antonidas falls really quickly. There are multiple viable ways to play this level. The first viable way is to try and stop the initial assault and hold Antonidas' base, which is very difficult, but I think it's possible. At the very least, it used to be possible. It's also possible I've made the initial assault stronger after I've realized this was doable, so it may or may not work. For this playthrough though, I choose to play with a larger economy instead, using my army to clear out creeps from nearby gold mines while Antonidas gets slaughtered, then make my stand at Uther's base. The Undead's first wave sends 3 level 10 heroes that are insanely hard to stop. With Muradin and Uther supported by a ton of towers, Griffin Riders, and Knights, I managed to just barely blunt the attack. Still, I'm barely hanging on, and the enemy attacks are only about to get tougher, because the Undead are busy constructing a second base where Antonidas used to be. Green is manageable, but Orange builds up super quickly, and their hero, originally a level 1 Crypt Lord, gains experience every time it dies. Soon, Green's attack waves are supported by massive Orange attack waves, while I'm barely holding on with my Griffins. With 24 minutes left in the timer, I give up on holding Uther's base, retreating to Jaina. By this point, my economy is really kicking in, and when the Undead begin their assault on Jaina, I have a maxed out army of Griffins. Jaina's base is no slouch either. She tries to be constantly at 60 supply with a diverse army, so Jaina can hold out for a really long time. Still, losing Uther this early is really scary, because once again, Purple starts constructing a new base in the Ashes, so the Undead attack waves get progressively stronger over time. One annoying thing while playing this level is that sometimes your allied heroes can use spells far away from their towers, then get stranded in the middle of the map. I tried to fix this with triggers that work sometimes, but I can also manually bring them back by attacking my allies' buildings, which tells my ally to defend their base and retreat from the middle of nowhere. I put everything into defending Jaina's base, because once her base falls, there's really no way I can survive on my own. Things feel okay for a while, as I bank up a lot of money, but when Purple's attacks ramp up, there is just too much undead. Things start to get really scary with 8 minutes remaining on the timer. My gold mines run out, and I slowly start draining money replacing my army. I micro my heart out to survive as long as possible, but with a minute left in the timer, Jaina's base gets overrun. I try and get Muradin out of there, but he falls with 20 seconds left. The Undead destroy Jaina's castle, but they're still another minute away from mine. At that point, when everything seems lost, the Orcs run in with a bunch of Terran Marines and save us from the Undead threat. This level is actually one that I think changed from a really bad level for a long time to become a fantastic level in its current state. Figuring out how to get the AI to start bases from scratch when your allies fell was a game changer, and it makes this level really fun to play. It's definitely one of the best levels here, pretty simple, yet really effective. According to Thrall, the Undead infestation is even worse on Draenor than it is on Azeroth, and Thrall announces his plans to have all his forces escape through the Dark Portal back to Draenor, then destroy it from the other side. He also requests that the humans release every orc stuck in the internment camps, and threatens to attack and storm these camps with a new army if the humans refuse to comply. Wait, you might ask, didn't Draenor get completely destroyed and demon-infested in Beyond the Dark Portal? Why would Thrall want to go there if it's set after that campaign? Well, you see, I don't think I actually finished the Beyond the Dark Portal campaign before making this level, so that's where my mind decided to go. It's not too relevant for this campaign, but it is relevant for the next, much worse campaign I made that isn't being shown in this video. You might also be wondering what happened to Arthas. Well, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about him. We're back with him for the last 2 levels. Chapter 9, The Night Elves. I'll just say it now, the intro of this level is legitimately pretty cool. Arthas and his marine friend are standing guard outside of a base in this new planet, and trees magically grow, separating him from the base. Everyone agrees that's weird, and this planet in general is super creepy. As I explore my surroundings without a goal, I find some creeps that I can pretty easily kill, alongside some mysterious and vulnerable structures. As I move up further, I find some invulnerable bears standing next to more magical trees, and find invulnerable owl scouts everywhere. Eventually, Arthas slays a giant dragon that's guarding Frostmourne. Okay, so this part of the storyline is silly. Middle school Red Wings really liked the Warcraft 3 campaign, but also didn't really understand what made it work, so I constantly borrowed events from the actual campaign without using any of the underlying narrative that made these events impactful. The Undead invade, but there's no foreshadowing as Kel'Thuzad or relationship with Mal'Ganis. The Orcs are enemies, but they don't play any role in highlighting Arthas' emotional state. Arthas gets Frostmourne here, but the blade doesn't represent any sort of curse or need any sacrifice. It's just a random sword he looted from the Night Elves. In my original campaign, you want to guess what this random marine that keeps following Arthas was named? Kel'Thuzad. Heh. I eventually changed that name when I realized it was really dumb. You can probably guess where this campaign is going now, and you can also guess that there will be no rhyme, reason, or emotional development behind these changes. Events just happen in my campaign. There is zero narrative cohesion behind them. Anyway, when Arthas gets Frostmourne, it turns to daytime, and we reveal a large Night Elf army standing near him. Tyrande takes the group prisoner, demands the humans surrender, and announces that Night Elf warriors are already infiltrating our base. Arthas uses his Divine Shield to escape, our base is completely thrashed by the Night Elves, and now I need to get back there as soon as possible. Writing issues aside, I actually really like the way the Night Elves are introduced here. I wanted to do more stuff with the Shadow Meld mechanic, and this felt like a very cool way to show it off. In a future level, one of the few levels that actually isn't terrible in my sequel campaign, you play as an undead Arthas trying to hunt down specific Night Elves with a time limit during a Nightlock level, and it's actually kinda awesome. Anyway, when I get back to my base, I realize something is really wrong with this level. The Night Elf ambush was way too powerful. The Night Elves are supposed to trash the base but lose a close fight, but the Night Elves just kinda won the fight and killed all my peasants, then utterly destroyed me with their first attack wave. I try the level again, this time killing more creeps in the starting section to mine more gold before getting my base. But I just don't have anywhere close enough to survive. My first instinct is to blame Reforged, thinking that maybe a Reforged update gave Huntresses and Archers a buff to change the math in the starting section. After looking more carefully though, I noticed Archers have 310 HP and Huntresses are still unarmored, meaning my map thankfully did not incorporate multiplayer balance changes. After reflecting on it, I think this is my fault. I probably just thought the initial section was too easy, added a couple more elves, then saved without testing it, having no idea it would tip the scales so far in the other direction. So, after getting crushed a couple times, I just went to the editor, removed a few Night Elf units from the ambush, and got my base with a few units to spare. After tampering with the start, the level is still not super easy. Blue and red both send pretty sizable attack waves, so my goal is to destroy blue before they overwhelm me. While I'm attacking blue, red arrives at my base with a massive army, forcing me to retreat and allowing blue to rebuild their base. Then, with my army and infrastructure gutted, I am double-teamed by massive attack waves and overwhelmed. My next attempt, I rush blue as fast as I can, successfully overcoming their defenses and knocking them out of the game pretty early. With only one set of attack waves to worry about, the level isn't too bad from here. Eventually, I build up and destroy red, rescuing the captured marine. Chapter 10, Exterminatus. We're at the final level of this campaign, and it is a hilarious one. Arthas' marine friend needs specific materials to repair the Wraith, and to get these materials, we need to exterminate a massive horde of enraged Night Elves. The level has a completely ridiculous amount of enemies, but in return, you finally get access to the Terran Marine. Marines are trainable from the barracks at 300 gold 50 lumber, but to train them, you need a castle and a blacksmith. Marines also benefit from infantry weapon and armor upgrades, and also from the Rifleman Long Rifles upgrade, since that mirrors the Academy range upgrade in StarCraft. I'm not ready for Marines yet though, because I only start with 3 peasants, having to build up my base from scratch. The first part of this level is spent trying to survive while teching up to Marines, which is not super easy because the Night Elves are aggressive. Trying to defend multiple points seems impossible right now, so I just go for a one-base tech rush while training footmen as my primary army. Once I get Marines, my army's damage output starts to skyrocket. Marines are overpowered, but they aren't invincible. Enemy ballistas can still do serious damage to them, Druids of the Talon can cyclone them and be incredibly annoying, and enemy heroes are existential threats. If I don't target her down ASAP, Tyranda's Starfall is capable of soloing an entire army of Marines, and Fan of Knives from the Warden also deals an insane amount of damage. Moving out to attack is also super risky, because while it doesn't take too long to mow down an enemy base, Night Elf attack waves will also very quickly destroy my base if I'm not in position to intercept them. Things look pretty desperate when my main gold mine runs out of money. I destroy purple and take their gold mine, but my base is being overrun, my barracks are destroyed, and I don't have the army to defend 2 places at once. Things get even worse when the enemy attack waves find my expansion, forcing my peasants to retreat and leaving me without the money to even build another town hall. I consider retreating, but instead clear creeps from a nearby gold mine, then start long distance mining while defending the smaller area. I used Resurrection to survive Tyranda's next attack, construct another town hall, and just barely defend my new mining area. Once I'm able to mine and train Marines again, I start to stabilize. The hard part in this level is stabilizing long enough to train Marines, but once you do stabilize, the fun part begins. Using Marines to exterminate the Night Elves feels incredible. Once I get that critical mass of Marines, entire armies cannot stand in my way, and the enemy bases start falling one by one. Sometimes, you'll notice that enemy heroes respawn after I've destroyed their altar, and that's because telling the AI to revive heroes at an altar is shockingly difficult. It should be easy, but trying to get buildings to revive a hero the way I can get buildings to train units is just usually doesn't work for me, and I have no idea why. So my method of reviving heroes in this level involves a bunch of triggers using if statements and wait commands, and as far as I'm aware these should work, but sometimes it revives a hero one extra time even after the altar dies. I have absolutely no idea why, and I'm curious to see if any of you can figure it out. There's one last thing to do before I finish this campaign, and this last quest is more of a victory lap than anything. There's a group of powerful dragons and golems at the top of the map, enough to make any normal army quake in fear. However, my Marines shred these creeps instantly, and I finish my Exterminatus of the Night Elves. The final cutscene plays as Tyranda plays her last desperate card. She summons Cenarius of the Xel'Naga to protect her and smite the humans. Cenarius kills the human invaders with a flick of his wrists, but then a Zerg Cerebrate calls on the universe to raise more undead. Arthas revives as an undead and kills Cenarius before he can react. Then he moves on to Tyranda, only for the night to fall and Tyranda to hide in the shadows and escape. And that's the end of part 1 of a project that I worked on for about 10 years. It wasn't 10 years straight on this one campaign. More 10 years on and off of this campaign, alongside 2.5 other sequel campaigns with levels of drastically inconsistent quality. This was my major creative project from about 2005 to 2010, with me going back to polish and add more occasionally all the way up until 2016. When Warcraft 3 Reforged got announced, I got really excited, thinking it would be a good excuse to get back to work on this campaign. Reforged removing custom campaigns was the reason I didn't buy this game, and by the time they re-added the feature, it was just way too late for me to want it. So what's the point of this video? Well, if you want to play the campaign for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description, but this is not really an advertisement for the thing I made. What it is, though, is just a reminder of how important games can be in fostering creativity. I never had any illusions this campaign would become super popular, I never intended to sell it, and my job doesn't really require any skills that I learned from making this campaign. However, even with its silly story, its questionable gimmicks, and inconsistent gameplay, it's still something I can point to and say, I created that. It's mine, it's something I spent so much time on and got so much out of, and it makes me smile that I can say that. This feeling, the feeling of creating something and being able to point to it with pride, is why games that involve creativity stay popular for so long. It's why games like Minecraft just keep on getting more popular, because there's always more you can build in that game. The Warcraft 3 world editor taught me so much about programming, and taught me so much about how campaigns are made and what goes on under the hood. The way this world editor is so accessible and powerful is, at least for me, the reason Warcraft 3 is my favorite Blizzard RTS game of all time, and probably my favorite game of all time. In the end, I do all the things I do because it's fun to be creative. I encourage everyone watching this to do something creative of your own, regardless of how it might turn out. We'll try new things, and we'll make mistakes, but we'll also create something uniquely us in the process, and that's beautiful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.